Why did they leave the radio on? Staff Sergeant Maya Chen heard the static crackling through her headset as the world turned upside down. The IED had punched through the convoy's lead vehicle, sending her Humvee careening off the road into a ravine she hadn't even seen coming. Metal screamed. Glass shattered. Her body slammed against the harness so hard she tasted copper. Then silence. The kind that makes your ears feel stuffed with cotton. The kind that means you're alone. She hung suspended in the driver's seat, the vehicle on its side, dashboard sparking, fuel dripping somewhere beneath her. Her team was gone. She'd watched their vehicles disappear into the dust cloud, racing away from the kill zone. Standard protocol. Save who you can. Come back for the rest. Except the enemy was already here and coming back might not be an option. Blood ran down her temple, warm against her sun-scorched skin. Her left shoulder screamed when she moved, probably dislocated. Ribs cracked, maybe broken, didn't matter. She unclipped the harness and dropped hard onto shattered glass. The M4 was still strapped across her chest. 4 magazines, 120 rounds. The radio on her vest was crushed, useless electronics ground into plastic shards. Her camelback had ruptured. 3 liters of water already soaking into the sand beneath the wreckage. She had a knife, a first aid kit, 2 MREs that might have survived the crash, and somewhere close, getting closer, she could hear engines, lots of them. Maya crawled through the broken window, every movement sending lightning through her ribs. The heat hit her like a physical wall, the kind that steals your breath, the kind that kills in hours if you're not careful. She pulled herself to higher ground, using rocks and scrub brush to haul her body 30 meters up from the wreckage. From there she counted vehicles. 6. No, 7. They moved in coordinated search patterns. Professional military, not militia. Methodical, disciplined, dangerous. She had maybe 3 minutes before they found the Humvee. Maybe 5 before they found her trail. The smart play was to run. Get distance. Hide, wait for rescue. But something her father had told her years ago whispered through the pain and the fear. When the enemy has the advantage, you don't play their game. You change the rules, you make them afraid, you become a ghost. She took a breath, tasted copper and grit, then moved. Not away from the enemy, parallel to them, using every microterrain feature, every shadow, every depression in the ground. The way her father had taught her when she was 16 and thought she knew everything. The way that had kept American operators alive in deserts from Korea to Iraq to Afghanistan for 70 years. The old ways, because technology fails but training endures. Summer 2009. Mojave Desert, California. Maya Chen was 16 years old and furious about it. Her father had driven her 8 hours into the desert, past the last gas station, past the last cell tower, past anything that resembled civilization. Now they stood in an ocean of sand and rock and heat that made her eyes water. A canteen, a poncho, a knife. That's what you get, Maya. 3 days, find your way back to the truck, or don't, your choice. Dad, this is insane. Mom's going to kill you. Your mother survived me teaching her navigation skills. You will too. He handed her a worn compass. Vietnam era, the kind they gave pilots in case they got shot down over the jungle. No batteries, no GPS chip, just magnetized metal and faith. Out here this is worth more than any smartphone. Learn why. Colonel David Chen was 62 years old. He'd earned his reputation during classified operations in Central America, the kind of missions that never made the news because they technically never happened. Special operations, the kind of soldier they don't make movies about because the files stay sealed for 50 years. After retirement, he'd done something unusual. He'd started teaching, not at military academies, not at official schools, private courses, small groups. The kind of training you couldn't get anywhere else, the kind the government pretended didn't exist. Young Maya didn't understand that part yet. She just knew Dad had taught her to shoot when she was 12, taught her to navigate by stars when she was 14, taught her that toughness wasn't about muscle, it was about will. Now, apparently, he was teaching her to not die in the desert. 3 days later, she stumbled back to the pickup truck. Sunburned, dehydrated, exhausted, but alive. Dad was waiting. A cooler full of ice water sat in the truck bed. He handed her a bottle without a word. She drank half before she could speak. "How'd I do?" "You're here, that's passing." He pointed to tire tracks in the sand, fresh ones she didn't recognize. "Company came by yesterday, asked what I was doing out here alone, told them I was waiting for my daughter. They asked if you were okay. I said you were learning." "Who were they?" "Government types. The kind who drive unmarked SUVs and carry weapons they don't advertise." She looked at the tracks, recent, purposeful. "Were you training someone else out here before me?" He smiled, the kind of smile that held secrets. "Maya, there are things I can't tell you, things that stay classified long after I'm dead, but I can tell you this. The skills I'm teaching you have kept American operators alive for decades. Vietnam, Desert Storm, Afghanistan, the locations change, the enemy changes, but the desert never changes." He pulled out a worn photograph from his wallet. It showed a younger version of himself in desert camouflage, standing with a group of hard-eyed men, all of them armed. One face had been carefully cut out of the photo. This was February 1991. Operation Desert Saber, the ground war. What they showed on TV lasted 4 days. What they didn't show lasted longer. We went deep into Iraqi territory, hunted high-value targets, intelligence officers coordinating chemical weapons shipments. He tapped the cut-out section. "We found them. Our mission was to eliminate the threat, extract intelligence, get out clean." "Did you?" "5 out of 6. The 6th one escaped. I put a round through his shoulder, but he got away. Intelligence said he disappeared into the system, went dark." "What happened to the photo, his face?" "I cut it out, don't need to remember it." He pointed to the desert around them. "But I remember what he taught me that night, what all my enemies have taught me." "What's that?" "Survival isn't about being the strongest or the fastest or having the best gear. It's about being willing to do what others won't, to adapt when everyone else quits, to remember that in the desert there's no backup, no second chances, just you and your training." Maya looked at the photograph again. "Did you ever see him again, the one who escaped?" "Not yet, but men like that don't forget. They carry grudges like other people carry wallets. If he's still alive, he's still angry. And if he ever figures out who I am, where I live, who my family is." He stopped, looked at her hard. "That's why I'm teaching you this, Maya. Not because I think you'll join the military, not because I want you to be a soldier, but because the world is full of men like that officer, men who don't quit, men who remember. And if they ever come for my family, I need to know my daughter can survive." She was 16. She didn't fully understand. But years later, in a different desert with different enemies, she would understand perfectly. The memory faded. Maya was back in the present, back in the heat, back in the hunt. The enemy vehicles were spreading out now, searchers fanning across the terrain. She moved like water through rocks, low and fluid, using the land itself as camouflage. Her shoulder throbbed, her ribs screamed. Didn't matter. Pain was just information, information she could ignore. She reached a cluster of boulders overlooking the search area. From here she could see them clearly. 12 soldiers, professional gear, coordinated hand signals. They weren't looking for survivors. They were looking for a body. They expected her dead. That was their first mistake. Maya checked her rifle, cleared the sand from the action. Slow, methodical, the way her father had taught her. The way SEAL instructors had drilled into her until it became reflex. She had 120 rounds, 12 targets. If she was smart, if she was patient, if she remembered everything she'd been taught, she might just survive this. But there was something she hadn't told them. Not yet. Something they didn't know about Staff Sergeant Maya Chen. Something that would change everything. She wasn't just a SEAL. She was a ghost operator, trained in techniques so classified they didn't appear in any manual, trained by men who'd learned in Vietnam, perfected in Panama, refined in Iraq. Her father's generation. The ones who understood that sometimes the mission isn't about winning the firefight. It's about making the enemy believe you were never there at all. She smiled through the blood and the pain. They wanted a body. She'd give them a ghost instead. What makes a soldier invisible? Maya watched the search team move through the wadi below her position. They were good, disciplined. They checked corners, covered angles, communicated efficiently, but they were looking for the wrong thing. They were looking for someone running, someone hiding, someone afraid. They weren't looking for someone hunting them. She'd learned this principle from her father during those brutal desert training sessions. The human eye tracks movement, it expects patterns, it anticipates flight response, so you give them nothing. You become part of the landscape, you let them walk past you, you wait, and when the moment comes, you act with absolute precision. The lead searcher was 30 meters away now, close enough that she could see the dust on his boots, the sweat staining his collar, the way he held his rifle just slightly too high, compensating for fatigue. That small detail told her everything. They'd been searching for 2 hours, maybe more. They were tired, starting to lose focus, starting to believe she was already dead somewhere under the wreckage. Fatal assumptions. Her father had warned her about those too. Never assume the enemy is dead until you see the body. And even then, be cautious. I've seen men pronounced dead get up and start shooting. The searchers moved past her position. She didn't breathe, didn't blink, didn't exist, just another rock in an ocean of rocks. They were 20 meters past when she finally allowed herself a slow, controlled breath. Her ribs protested. She ignored them. Phase 1 complete. They believed she was either dead or running. Now came Phase 2, make them uncertain, make them scared, make them start seeing ghosts. She moved to a new position, circling wide around their perimeter. The sun was climbing now, turning the desert into a furnace. The heat would be her ally. It would tire them faster, make them drink more water, make them sloppy. She found what she was looking for half a click from the wreckage. A narrow canyon, barely 3 meters wide, with rock walls that trapped heat like an oven. Perfect. She spent 20 minutes setting up. Used paracord from her vest to create tripwires at ankle height. Stacked rocks in configurations that would collapse with pressure. Created false trails leading to dead ends. Nothing lethal. That wasn't the point. The point was psychological. The point was making them wonder what else she'd prepared. Making them question every shadow, every sound, every rock. By the time she finished, the canyon had become a maze of doubt. She climbed to high ground and waited. Didn't take long. The search pattern brought them straight toward her trap. 6 soldiers moving in tactical formation, professional, cautious, not cautious enough. The first tripwire caught the point man across the shin. He stumbled, didn't fall, but the surprise made him call out. The team stopped, started checking the ground, started realizing this wasn't random. Someone had prepared this. Someone was here. Someone was watching. Maya saw the shift in their body language, the way they stood closer together, the way they started looking up instead of just ahead. Fear. Not panic, not yet, but uncertainty. And uncertainty was the crack in the armor she needed. She fired once, not at them, at a rock 30 meters to their left. The round ricocheted with a sound like an angry wasp, sending stone fragments flying. The team scattered, taking cover, shouting coordinates. They returned fire at empty air, wasted ammunition on shadows. Maya was already gone, moving to her next position. 1 round expended, 119 remaining, all part of the plan. This was the game her father had taught her. Not about killing, about psychological dominance. About making a numerically superior force waste resources chasing phantoms, about turning their strength into weakness. She'd studied the theory at the academy, asymmetric warfare, force multiplication through psychological operations, but her father had lived it. Vietnam, facing an enemy that materialized from jungle and vanished like smoke. He'd learned from them, adapted their techniques, taught them to his daughter. Now she was teaching those lessons to a new enemy. The radio chatter increased. She couldn't understand the language, but she understood the tone. Confusion, frustration. They were calling for backup, reporting contact, changing their mission parameters. Good. More units meant more confusion, more opportunities. She moved through the rocks like water, using every shadow, every depression. Her shoulder was numb now, probably not a good sign, but adrenaline was a powerful anesthetic. She reached an outcropping overlooking their rally point, could see them clearly. 12 had become 18. They were grouping up, seeking safety in numbers. Another mistake. Her father's voice echoed in her memory. Big groups make big targets. Small groups can disappear. Never forget which one you want to be. Maya set up for her second shot. This one would count, not to kill but to wound. A wounded soldier requires 2 others to carry him, 3 soldiers removed from the fight, plus the psychological impact, plus the resources needed for medical evacuation. 1 bullet, multiple effects. She selected her target carefully, not the leader, not the youngest, someone in the middle of the formation, someone whose injury would disrupt their entire structure. She controlled her breathing, let her heart rate settle, found that quiet space between heartbeats where the shot lives. The rifle spoke once. The target dropped, clutching his leg. Not fatal, but debilitating. His teammates rushed to help, exactly as she'd predicted. The formation collapsed inward, defensive, protective. She watched through her scope as they scrambled to provide aid, calling frantically on radios, scanning the rocks for a target they couldn't see. She was already moving again, 118 rounds left. But something changed. She felt it before she saw it. The rhythm of the hunt shifted. The radio chatter took on a different tone, and then she saw why. 2 new vehicles cresting the ridge, bigger, heavier, and mounted on top of each was a thermal imaging system. Her stomach dropped. Thermal, that changed everything. Her concealment techniques worked against visual identification, against the naked eye, against regular optics, but thermal imaging saw heat signatures, saw through camouflage, saw bodies against the cool rock. She had maybe minutes before those systems swept her position, maybe less. For the first time since the crash, Maya felt something close to panic. But panic was a choice, and she'd been trained to choose differently. Her father's voice again, calm and steady. When the situation changes, you don't freeze. You adapt. You find the new advantage. There's always an advantage if you're willing to look. She looked, scanned her environment with new eyes. The sun was higher now, baking the rocks around her. Everything was heating up. Thermal imaging worked best with temperature contrast. But when everything is hot, distinguishing individual signatures becomes harder. Not impossible, but harder. She needed to move, not away, toward the one place they'd never expect, toward the heat source they'd already dismissed, toward the burning wreckage of her own Humvee. How hot is too hot to survive? The wreckage was still smoldering when Maya reached it. Fuel had ignited in the crash, turning the vehicle into a twisted metal furnace that radiated heat in visible waves. The enemy had already searched it, written it off, moved on, which made it perfect. She approached from the downwind side, using the smoke as cover. The heat was almost unbearable. Her skin felt like it was blistering just from proximity, but heat was relative. Pain was relative. Survival wasn't. She worked quickly, used her knife to cut sections of seat cushion, still hot but no longer burning, wrapped them around her body, creating an insulation layer. It wouldn't hide her heat signature completely, but it would distort it, make her look like debris, like residual heat from the wreck, not like a human target. The thermal vehicles were sweeping closer now. She could hear the whine of their surveillance equipment, the electronic hum of military-grade sensors. They were methodical, professional, covering every sector. She pressed herself against a twisted section of frame, letting the metal's heat signature merge with her own. The first vehicle passed within 15 meters. She watched through a gap in the wreckage as the operator scanned the area, saw him pause, saw him zoom in on her position. Her heart hammered against her cracked ribs. 1 second, 2 seconds, 3. He moved on, tagged her signature as vehicular debris. Environmental noise, not a target. Maya let out a breath she didn't know she'd been holding. The cushion insulation had worked. Barely, but barely was enough. She waited until both thermal vehicles moved past, then extracted herself from the wreckage. Her hands were burned. Her face felt raw, but she was alive, still invisible, still hunting. The enemy was in full search mode now, spreading out in wider patterns. They'd brought in reinforcements. She counted 26 soldiers now, with more vehicles arriving. They were turning this into a full operation. Command was taking her seriously. Good. That meant resources. That meant focus. That meant they were playing her game without knowing it. She needed water. The heat was crushing now, midday sun turning the desert into a kiln. Dehydration would kill her faster than enemy bullets. She scanned the landscape looking for signs. Her father had taught her this too. Desert survival wasn't about finding water. It was about reading the land's subtle tells. Birds, insects, plant life. Any moisture source drew life. You just had to know how to look. There, a cluster of desert willows half a click away. Their roots went deep, tapping underground moisture. Where roots went, water followed. She moved toward them using rock formations as cover. Every step was measured, deliberate. The enemy was tightening their perimeter, but they were looking outward. They still expected her to run, to try to escape. They didn't understand that she'd already decided. She wasn't leaving until the job was done. At the willows she dug, not deep, just enough to reach damp soil, placed a plastic bag over the vegetation, creating a crude solar still. It would collect moisture through plant transpiration. Not much, maybe half a liter by sunset, but half a liter was the difference between conscious and delirious. She covered her work site, made it invisible, and moved on. The sun was past its zenith when she found her next advantage. A natural choke point where the terrain narrowed between two rock formations. Any vehicle would have to slow down to navigate it. Any foot patrol would cluster together for security. It was tactically obvious, which meant professionals would recognize it as a potential ambush site. Which was why she didn't set up there. Instead, she positioned herself on the high ground 70 meters back, where they'd retreat to if they suspected an ambush ahead, where they'd feel safe, where they'd regroup and make new plans. She stacked rocks to create a stable shooting platform, checked sight lines, calculated wind drift, prepared for a shot she might not take for hours. Then she waited. Waiting was its own skill. Most people couldn't do it. Their minds wandered, their focus drifted. They got bored or anxious or restless, but Maya had been trained in a different kind of patience. The kind that understood waiting wasn't passive. It was active preparation. Every minute spent waiting was a minute to observe, to learn enemy patterns, to refine the plan. Her father had taught her this during those long desert nights when she was 16. They'd sat together under stars, completely still, just watching, listening, feeling the environment. Most people think silence is the absence of sound, but that's wrong. Silence is when you finally hear everything else. The wind patterns, the animal movements, the way temperature shifts change air density. Learn to read silence, Maya, and you'll never be lost. She read the silence now, heard enemy vehicles in the distance, heard helicopter rotors far to the east, probably bringing more reinforcements, heard the whisper of wind through rock, carrying scents and sounds she'd learned to interpret. They were organizing something big, a coordinated sweep. They were done playing cautious. Good caution kept people alive. Aggression created mistakes. 2 hours later, as the sun started its descent, they came. A convoy of 6 vehicles moving in tactical spacing, 30-plus soldiers. They approached the choke point exactly as she'd predicted. Slowed down, scanned for threats, found nothing. Then, as trained, they pulled back to the high ground to reassess. right into her kill zone. Maya had a choice to make, the kind of choice that defined who you were. She could take the shot, drop the officer barking orders, create chaos, probably kill several more before they located her position. It would be tactically sound, militarily justified. Her training said eliminate the threat. But something else whispered in her mind. Her father's voice, not from training, from a different conversation. One they'd had the night before she shipped out to basic. Maya, you're going to face moments where you have all the power, where you could take a life easily, justified, legal. And you'll have to decide not whether you can, but whether you should. Remember that taking a life is easy. Living with it is hard. Make sure every trigger pull is necessary. Make sure it matters. She looked through her scope, saw the officer clearly, saw his face, young, maybe 30, saw him checking a map, coordinating with his team, saw him being professional, doing his job, trying to find her. She lowered the rifle. Not because she was weak, not because she was afraid, but because killing him wouldn't change her tactical situation. It would just make him dead. And despite everything, despite the crash and the hunt and the pain, Maya Chen was still deciding what kind of soldier she wanted to be. She watched them regroup, watched them make plans, watched them start moving again. Then she ghosted away deeper into the rocks, leaving no trace. The enemy wouldn't find her. Not today, not like this, but she'd learned something important. She'd learned their patterns, their response times, their equipment, their tendencies. And when the rescue came, and it would come, she'd be ready to help them understand exactly who they'd been hunting. But first, she had to survive the night. What happens when a ghost stops hiding? Sunset turned the desert into liquid gold, then bruised purple, then black. Maya watched the transformation from a cave entrance she'd found on the ridge's north face. It wasn't deep, maybe 3 meters, but it provided cover from thermal imaging and shelter from the dropping temperature. Desert nights were killers in their own way. 120 degrees during the day, 40 degrees after dark. The swing could stop your heart if you weren't prepared. She'd recovered her solar still before full dark, half a liter of water exactly as predicted. She drank it slowly, letting her body absorb every drop. Her shoulder was swollen now, the joint visibly displaced. She'd have to reduce it soon or risk permanent damage. But not yet, not while the enemy was still close. They'd set up a perimeter camp 2 clicks away. She could see their lights, count their fires. 26 soldiers had grown to over 40. They were committed now. This wasn't just a cleanup operation anymore. This was a manhunt. Someone high up had decided that one SEAL was worth this much effort. She should have felt afraid, outnumbered 40 to 1, injured, running out of ammunition, cut off from support. Any rational assessment said she was dead, should have been dead already. Survival at this point was statistical impossibility. But Maya didn't feel afraid. She felt calm, centered, like all the training, all the preparation, all those brutal lessons in the desert with her father had led to this exact moment. She'd spent years wondering if she was good enough, strong enough, tough enough. Now she knew. The desert had tested her. She'd passed. Around 2200 hours, her radio crackled to life. She'd thought it was destroyed, but apparently some circuit had survived, finally finding signal strength. Static, then a voice, faint but clear. Broken Arrow, this is Overwatch. If you can hear this transmission, key your mic twice. Her call sign, her team, they were looking. Maya grabbed the radio, but her hand stopped before keying the mic. Twice meant she was alive but compromised. Standard protocol. But it also meant giving away her position. Radio transmissions could be triangulated. The enemy probably had the equipment. They were professionals. She thought about it, weighed the options, made the calculation. Then she keyed the mic. Click, click. Copy Broken Arrow. We have thermal signatures showing 40+ hostiles in your area. Extraction is not currently feasible. Recommend you evade and move to alternate LZ, coordinates to follow. Break. The voice paused. She recognized it now. Chief Warrant Officer Marcus Webb, former Delta, current SEAL instructor, the man who'd trained her in escape and evasion, the man who'd told her on graduation day that she was the best natural ghost he'd ever seen. His voice came back, quieter, personal. "Maya, your dad would be proud. We're coming for you, just keep breathing, out." The radio went dead. Maya sat in the darkness, processing. They were coming, but extraction wasn't feasible, which meant she was on her own for at least another 12 hours, probably 24, maybe longer, and the enemy wasn't going anywhere. She could wait it out, hide, survive, let them search while she stayed invisible. That was the smart play, the safe play, the one that maximized her chances. But something had shifted in her thinking. Something about seeing that officer through her scope, about choosing not to kill when she could have, about understanding that survival wasn't just about staying alive. It was about what you carried with you when you finally made it home. Her father had told her stories, Vietnam stories, the kind he never shared at dinner parties, about operations that went sideways, about soldiers trapped behind enemy lines, about the ones who made it back and the ones who didn't. He'd told her that the difference wasn't always skill or luck. Sometimes it was simply deciding that hiding wasn't enough, that sometimes you had to act. She checked her rifle, 118 rounds, then she started planning. By midnight, she'd moved to a new position, closer to the enemy camp, close enough to count sleeping bags, identify guard rotations, map out their defensive perimeter. They'd set up well, professional spacing, overlapping fields of fire, but they'd made one critical mistake. They'd assumed she was running. Maya had stopped running. At 200 hours, she moved, not toward the camp, toward their vehicle depot on the perimeter's edge. 6 vehicles parked in a row, 4 technicals with mounted guns, 2 transport trucks, all of them unguarded because who would be stupid enough to approach an armed encampment? She placed thermite grenades under 2 technicals. Not from her kit, she'd found them in her damaged Humvee. Standard equipment she'd salvaged before leaving the wreck. She set the timers for 30 minutes. 30 minutes to get clear. 30 minutes to be somewhere else when chaos erupted. Then she moved to the communications tent. It was guarded, but guards had patterns. She watched, learned the timing, found the gap. 3 minutes between patrols, she used 2. Inside the tent, she worked fast, didn't sabotage anything, didn't destroy equipment, just changed settings, shifted frequencies, altered coordinates in their GPS units, small changes, subtle, the kind that would create confusion without being obvious, the kind that would make them question their intel, question their equipment, question themselves. She was out of the tent before the next patrol arrived. At 2:30, the thermite grenades detonated. White-hot magnesium burned through engine blocks like paper. The camp exploded into activity. Soldiers rushing to the vehicles, officers shouting orders. Chaos. Beautiful, distracting chaos. Maya was already half a click away, watching from high ground. She'd fired no shots, killed no one, but she'd accomplished something more important. She'd made them realize they were fighting someone who wasn't afraid anymore, someone who could walk into their camp and walk back out like smoke. She'd become exactly what her father had trained her to be. A ghost with teeth. Can you teach someone to be unbreakable? 3 years later, different desert, different mission, same questions. Master Chief Maya Chen stood at the front of a training room at Naval Special Warfare Center in Coronado. 23 students sat before her, 18 men, 5 women, all of them the best of the best, all of them about to learn that best wasn't good enough. What makes a SEAL different from other special operators? A hand went up. Young man, early 20s, looked confident. Superior training, Master Chief. Wrong. Another hand, better equipment. Wrong. Silence, they were learning. Finally, one of the women spoke, quiet voice but steady. The refusal to quit. Maya nodded, close, but still not complete. What makes a SEAL different is what happens when everything else fails, when training isn't enough, when equipment breaks, when your body wants to quit but the mission says no. She clicked a remote. The screen behind her lit up with a satellite image, desert terrain, a crash site, 40-plus enemy signatures surrounding a single friendly designation. This was 3 years ago, Operation Classified. I was the friendly signature. They left me because they had to. Standard protocol. Extract who you can, return for the rest. But the enemy had other plans. She clicked again. Time-lapse imagery showed the enemy search pattern, the tightening perimeter, the increasing numbers. By nightfall, I was facing 42 hostiles. I had 118 rounds, no water, dislocated shoulder, cracked ribs, no comms except a damaged radio that might get me killed if I used it. The room was completely silent. So I had a choice, hide and wait for rescue, or change the game. She clicked through more images, destroyed vehicles, confused search patterns, enemy forces spread out in disarray. I chose to stop being hunted and start hunting, not to kill. That would have been temporary victory, but to make them uncertain, to make them afraid, to make them understand they were chasing someone who'd learned from the best teachers in the world. She turned to face them directly. My father taught me in a desert when I was 16. No GPS, no radio, no backup, just a compass and a knife and the understanding that survival is a choice you make every single moment. SEAL instructors taught me the technical skills, but my father taught me something more important. He taught me that being unbreakable isn't about not feeling fear. It's about deciding that fear doesn't get to make your choices. One of the male students raised his hand. Master Chief, how did you get out? 24 hours after the crash, my team came back. They had to fight through the enemy perimeter I'd already disrupted. By the time they reached me, I'd destroyed 6 vehicles, disabled their communications, and created enough confusion that the enemy didn't know if they were fighting one SEAL or a whole platoon. She smiled slightly. Chief Webb told me later that when they found me, I was asleep in a cave entrance, my rifle across my lap, empty water bottle beside me. He said I looked like I'd just finished a light workout. The room erupted in nervous laughter. But that's not the lesson I want you to learn today. The laughter stopped. The lesson is this: I didn't survive because I was the best shooter or the fastest runner or because I had some special ability you don't have. I survived because when the situation changed, I changed with it. When they expected me to run, I attacked. When they expected aggression, I vanished. When they thought they had me figured out, I became something else. She clicked to the final slide. It showed a simple quote. Adapt or die. It's not just a saying. It's the only truth that matters when everything goes wrong. She shut off the screen. Tomorrow morning, 400, you'll start your E&E practical exercise. We're going to put you in the same desert where my father trained me. You'll have a compass, a knife, and 3 days to find your way to extraction. Some of you will quit. Some of you will get picked up by our hunter teams, and a very few of you will make it all the way through. She walked toward the door, then stopped. One more thing. My father used to tell me that the desert doesn't care about your rank or your resume. It only cares whether you can read its language. Learn to listen. Learn to adapt. Learn to become part of the landscape instead of fighting against it. Do that, and you'll not only survive, you'll discover what you're actually capable of. She left them sitting there processing, wondering if they had what it took. Just like she'd wondered once. What gets passed down isn't always what gets taught. 48 hours into the E&E exercise, Maya tracked one of her students through the Nevada desert, Lieutenant Sarah Morrison, former Marine officer, crossover candidate. She'd been strong in close quarters combat, adequate in marksmanship, outstanding in tactical planning. But this wasn't about any of those skills. This was about heart. Morrison had been alone for 2 days. No food except what she could find. No water except what she could extract from desert plants. The hunter teams had been relentless, pushing her constantly, never letting her rest. Maya watched through binoculars as Morrison stumbled over a ridge, clearly exhausted, clearly hurting, and clearly not quitting. That's what Maya was looking for. Not perfection, not superhuman endurance, just the refusal to stop. The same quality her father had seen in her when she was 16 and half dead from dehydration, but still putting one foot in front of the other. Morrison found a shaded overhang and collapsed. For a moment, Maya thought she might activate her emergency beacon. Call it done. It would be honorable. She'd already lasted longer than 60% of candidates. But then Morrison did something unexpected. She pulled out her compass, the same Korean War-era compass Maya's father had given her, the same one Maya had passed to Morrison at the start of the exercise with simple instructions. My father gave this to me. It's kept Americans alive through 6 wars. Don't lose it. Morrison studied the compass, used it to get her bearings. Then she stood up, adjusted her makeshift pack and started walking again. Not toward the easy extraction point, toward the harder one, the one that would prove something. Maya smiled, she'd seen enough. That night at the observation post, Chief Webb found her reviewing Morrison's progress. "She's going to make it," Webb said. "I know. You gave her your dad's compass, the one you said you'd never let go of." "I haven't let go of it. I'm just letting someone else carry it for a while." Webb sat down beside her. "Your old man would be proud, Maya, not just of what you survived, of what you're building here." "I'm just teaching what I was taught." "No, you're teaching what you learned. There's a difference. Your father taught you techniques, but you learned something deeper. You learned that survival is about more than just staying alive. It's about who you choose to be when everything's trying to break you." Maya thought about that. Thought about the choice she'd made 3 years ago when she had that officer in her sights. About deciding that killing him would make her a good soldier, but not the soldier she wanted to be. "Webb, do you think Dad knew? When he was training me in that desert, do you think he knew I'd end up here, teaching others?" "Honestly, I think he hoped, but he was also preparing you for something else." "What?" Webb pulled out a folder, classified stamp across the front. "Before your father retired, he was involved in something called Project Continuity. It was a program designed to preserve special operations knowledge across generations. He trained select operators in old-school techniques that were being lost to technology dependence. Survival skills, escape and evasion, psychological warfare tactics from Vietnam and Korea." He opened the folder. Inside were photographs. Her father, younger, standing with groups of soldiers across different decades. He trained over 200 operators. Most of them went on to become instructors themselves. They taught thousands more. The techniques you're teaching, they're not just your father's. They're a legacy that goes back to World War II, to OSS operators behind enemy lines, to every conflict where someone had to survive impossible odds. Maya studied the photos, saw the progression, her father's methods spreading through generations like roots through desert soil. "Why are you showing me this now?" "Because you're part of that chain now, Maya. You're not just teaching E and E skills. You're passing on something that matters, something that saves lives long after we're gone." He stood up to leave, then paused. "Your father told me something before he died. Asked me to tell you when the time was right." Maya looked up. He said, "Tell Maya she was always stronger than she believed. Tell her the compass wasn't the gift. The gift was teaching her to trust herself when everything else fails. The compass was just a reminder." Webb left her alone with that thought. Maya sat in the darkness, watching Morrison's heat signature on the thermal monitor, still moving, still fighting, still refusing to quit, and she understood what her father had really been teaching all those years ago in the Arizona desert. Not just how to survive, but why survival mattered. Because every person who learned to overcome impossible odds became capable of teaching someone else. And that chain of knowledge, that refusal to let the next generation face the darkness unprepared, was what separated humans from the desert that tried to kill them. The knowledge survived, the legacy continued. And somewhere, in whatever came after this life, she hoped her father could see what his lessons had become. Not just tactics in a manual, but living principles carried forward by students who would become teachers, who would face their own impossible moments, who would choose to stand when falling was easier, who would pass their own compasses to the next generation. That was the real gift, not the survival, the meaning in it. Sometimes dignity doesn't speak, it simply acts. 6 months later, Maya stood in the same Nevada desert where her father had trained her 17 years ago. The landscape hadn't changed, same rocks, same heat, same endless horizon, but she had changed, and because of that, so had others. Lieutenant Sarah Morrison stood beside her now, no longer a student, a graduate, a SEAL, one of 17 from that class who'd made it through. Morrison wore her trident with quiet pride, the same way Maya did, the same way her father had. "Master Chief, permission to speak freely." "Granted. When you gave me your father's compass, did you know I'd make it?" Maya smiled. "No, but I knew you'd try, that's all anyone can ask." Morrison pulled the compass from her pocket, held it out. "You should have this back. Keep it, pass it to the next candidate who needs it. That's how this works. Knowledge passes forward, generation to generation." Morrison nodded, understanding. She pocketed the compass carefully. "There's someone I want you to meet," Maya said. They walked to a truck parked in the shade. An older man stood there, gray hair, weathered face, eyes that had seen too much. He extended his hand. "Lieutenant Morrison, this is Colonel Marcus Webb's father. Command Sergeant Major Richard Webb, retired. He trained with my father in the 80s. The older Webb shook Morrison's hand. "Heard you gave the hunter teams hell during your E&E, doubled back on your own trail. Used a dry riverbed as a highway. Smart thinking." "Master Chief Chen taught me well, Sergeant Major." "She learned from the best, and now she's becoming the best. The cycle continues." He turned to Maya. "Your father would have enjoyed seeing this, seeing his lessons still saving lives, still building warriors." "I wish he could have." "He can, in the only way that matters, through you, through the students you teach, through every operator who makes it home because they remembered something you taught them." They stood together in the desert silence. 3 generations of warriors, different wars, different enemies, but the same understanding that some truths transcend time. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of gold and crimson. The same sunset her father had watched. The same sunset future SEALs would watch after Maya was gone. Eternal, unchanging, true. Morrison broke the silence. "Master Chief, can I ask you something? When you were trapped by those 40 hostiles, when you had every reason to just hide and wait for rescue, what made you decide to fight back?" Maya thought about that, about the real answer, not the tactical one, not the one that sounded good in reports, the true one. "I remembered something my father told me when I was 16 and thought I was going to die in this desert," he said. "Maya, survival isn't the goal. Living with honor is the goal. Survival is just the method. When I was lying in that cave, injured, outnumbered, I had to decide what kind of soldier I wanted to be. The kind who just survived, or the kind who fought with honor even when no one was watching. And you chose honor. I chose to be someone my father would recognize, someone who didn't just survive the training, someone who understood what the training was actually for." Richard Webb nodded slowly. "That's what your father taught best, not techniques, character, the understanding that all the skills in the world don't matter if you don't know why you're using them." He looked at Morrison. "You're inheriting more than just tactics, Lieutenant. You're inheriting a tradition, a way of thinking about service and sacrifice, about what it means to be worthy of the trident you wear. Morrison stood straighter. I understand, Sergeant Major, and I won't let it down. I know you won't, because Maya wouldn't have passed you through if she thought you would. The three of them walked back to the vehicles as darkness fell. Above them, stars began to emerge. The same stars that had guided Korean War pilots home, the same stars her father had used to navigate Iraqi deserts, the same stars that would guide countless warriors yet to come. Maya stopped walking, looked up at those eternal lights. Morrison and Richard Webb stopped beside her. My father used to say that the stars are the desert's gift to warriors, Maya said quietly. Technology fails, equipment breaks, but the stars remain. Constant, reliable, true. As long as you know how to read them, you're never truly lost. Morrison looked up. Did he teach you navigation by stars? He taught me more than that. He taught me that finding your way isn't just about geography. It's about knowing who you are when everything else is stripped away. When you have nothing but stars and willpower and the lessons of everyone who survived before you. Richard Webb smiled. He was a hell of a teacher, your father, a hell of a warrior, and he'd be damn proud to see what you've become, Maya. Not just a survivor, a legacy builder, someone who ensures the next generation doesn't have to learn everything the hard way. They drove back toward civilization, leaving the desert behind. But the desert never really left them. It lived in the lessons they carried, in the techniques they practiced, in the understanding that some knowledge is too important to let die. Maya would teach for another 20 years, would train hundreds of operators, would see her students become instructors themselves, would watch the chain of knowledge extend further with each generation. Morrison would go on to train others, eventually becoming Master Chief herself, would pass the compass to a young operator who needed it, would tell that operator the story of Colonel David Chen and his daughter who learned that dignity doesn't speak, it simply acts. The knowledge would survive, the legacy would continue. Because some missions span lifetimes, some wars never truly end, some truths transcend everything. And in the desert, under eternal stars, warriors honor their teachers by becoming teachers themselves. The wheel turns, the debt passes forward, and the lessons endure.